assume I'm older here. I'm an older generation through communications media on internet, not on social media, through access to the websites of the. I'm kind of an old-fashioned person. Yeah, everything's allowed. It interesting to know that both on the educational side, on our formation since we are young, and also our experiences in the territories, how we see the climate change is impacting us, and this conversation also occurs, and the relevance that the conversation has on the media in these panels to agree on how the climate change affect us and how can we collaborate. So now going to the first question that we got for today, I wanted to ask Francisco and Taissa, how do you think that the children can contribute to the work of the journalism to promote reliable information about climate change? And not only from this perspective of children receiving information and that they have to be informed, they have to educate themselves, but also sign comprehensive part, an active part of the decision making and the generation of information. It's a little kind of a dense question, but you can address it in the way you want. Thank you very much for the question. Those conversations which are more dense is the ones that we need to really make, because those are the example, the cases that happens the most. And for me, I think that on one hand, I think that we need to educate children to empower them. And one way to empower them is through the education, specifically the environmental education, climate education, citizenship education, which involves that education also to taught the reality of their territories, so they can have a general context and a base context to therefore be able to produce the information, to be able to transmit, disseminate the information, and to collect the information, basically, which is the work of the journalist. That's what the journalists do, but also children have important testimonies to contribute and important denouncements, because the rights of children are being violated constantly due to the climate change. As you know, the climate change and crisis is a crisis of the children's rights, and we need to address it from that perspective. So in the first instance, we need to give them the necessary tools to children so they can be empowered, and then they can go to their territories and they can collect the testimonies, the stories, and they can make them visual and to visualize them to the rest of the world. I think children, they are not only the main vulnerables of the climate conflict and the consequences of this conflict, like political instability and the weakening of the democracy, just like more armed conflict, the lack of water, a series of breaches against the human rights and the rights of the children. And they are also active agents of change. And that's what we are reivindicating here. We need basically to give them a platform and a space so they can express themselves, and to give them the tools to do this.
Well, I see that teenagers and children participation is essential in this day of sharing information to face climate crisis. Children and teenagers have a key role, not only as receivers of information, but also as active agents in promoting and sharing reliable knowledge on environmental topics. Besides, when you involve children and teenagers in promoting reliable information, you are training them to develop critical thinking skills and analysis and communication. This is not only a contribution to their own personal development, but also strengthens society as a whole by creating an environmental responsibility culture. Therefore, it is key to create safe and inclusive spaces where children and teenagers participate actively in the promotion of reliable information concerning the environmental crisis. Thank you very much. It's very important here. I like it when both agree in the need of children and teenagers are key protagonists. They're not just receivers of what happens, but they have something to say. And I love it that you're saying that all together. So I'm going to dare saying and take some minute, just 1 minute as TikTok or Instagram reel format. How have you felt in this sharing and being protagonists or stakeholders? How do you feel by sharing your knowledge here? For me, as a young activist, it's very important to be in environments and places like this. So, not only personally, but also taking all this knowledge to my own community. For me, it is very important because since I was a little girl, I've been part of this environment. My father educated me and informed me about this. Because when as I was raised as a kid like that, they taught me the subject of activism. And the climate changes that have happened. Thank you very much, Taissa. Francisco, anything you would like to share? Well, in my case, I think that by being in these spaces, we have also a great responsibility for being here because here, and I mean in general, and in discussion, public discussion spaces on freedom of expression, human rights, and environment, historically, these spaces have been reduced to adults and even more reduced to other population groups, for example, men. And we can reduce it even further, right? Where decision making spaces, the concept of citizenship in the old Greece, you were a citizen, the citizen was not a foreign, the citizen was not also a slave, precisely. Currently, there is still modern slavery. Unfortunately, more than 30 million people all over the world are considered slaves. So I think that there are spaces that must be represent a collective voice. And as Taissa said, not only as an individual, but a whole generation that must get into these spaces and be here because that's what we request. You know, little by little, we have been managing to get this, but we need more inclusion into these spaces. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to move to the other generation in this conversation because, of course, we are all talking about here. So my question is, considering the interconnection between children and teenagers' rights and the global demand of regulating social media platforms and decrease vulnerabilities, and also considering all problems surrounding environmental information that can be reliable, how can we nurse the resilience of children and teenagers in this generational challenge we face? I'm going to start with João. Well, I think that first of all, there's a diagnosis. What's happening? What's the problem right now? Today, one of the problems is the lack of transparency of social media platforms. We, what you called Instagram is not the same Instagram that I have. You know, I come here as a different person, even though the algorithms, some things, depending on, you know, maybe payment subscriptions, we see different things. I think that San Francisco have much more conditions to say what it is, to do a diagnosis today of social media better than me, without any instruments, you know, without any, how can I say, you have a natural a natural vision and experience, because they are living in a more intense way with people that they do it similarly. And actually, teenage here, we're talking about teenagers, they are the trend, right? And they bring trends to the social media. But that also means that besides the diagnostic tool, we have to give some answers. And the answers that we're proposing are related basically with three different points. One is the responsibility of the platforms. The platforms cannot be totally responsible for the content of third parties. Otherwise, we will transform it into traditional media, and they're going to remove everything that they question in responsibility. But they cannot be the complete opposite, which is what happens in most parts of the world, so that they are not liable to anything. And that is where they don't have any action to prevent illegal content, for example. So, really, responsibility. This responsibility generates a care, a duty. If I invite you to my home, you expect me to have power, my house to be clean so people can work safer, etc. We get into social network, and actually we don't have any guarantees, especially for children and teenagers, any care spaces, any safe spaces, all the rights that are online all the rights of children and teenagers, they need to be part of social media platforms. They cannot depend on the child to request the parent to request justice to a content that in 24 hours can immediately create damage. And the third point, and to finish, the discussion of assessment and mitigation of risks. Systemic risk to our rights. Francisco cited some rights that are being affected that are related to these topics that we're talking about today. But if there is an algorithm that generates every day the same kind of traction or drive to legal content, the problem is not the content, the problem is the algorithm, right? Because that, the content is already there, and the algorithm says, okay, let's all watch this illegal content. So the ability, and this is something that is teaching us the European experience, on the discussion of identifying and mitigating systemic risks that we need to use. And why? Because this creates a space where tomorrow's social networks, next year's social networks, are going to be safer, more democratic, more rights protection of this year. We cannot change everything immediately and think that the world is changed by using a button, but the trend has to go into improvement and not getting worse. Thank you, João, so much. Awo?
Right. So I'll take you from where Francisco and the friend left off. With regards to providing them with a platform, let's assume, I always like to think for people who might not have the resources to get into spaces where they are today. What can we do? Is that to say that we cannot take part in climate change conversations? No, they should, or they can. And how do we do that? If you are a media person, you take a group of young people to the field, they observe the situation, they come back, you put together a report with them, and that report is published. It's one way of encouraging them that, okay, you can make recommendations to government and you'll be taken up and things will change in your interest. The same applies to every other thing. And as much as possible let's bring down the discussion in the language they can relate to. So one of those best practices is what Alana Institute is practicing here. The young lady is not able to connect with the regular language. However, there's an interpreter who is helping her to take part in the discussion. And these are some of the things that we could be doing at our local levels in order to feed into the bigger picture at the national level for it to go forward. Now back to my substantive
question. Yes. Go ahead, please.
Yes. So we look at children's rights, and we always just talk about it. And we don't involve them as they should be involved. I feel that if we stop taking children to be a second thought or an afterthought and making them stakeholders from the design, inception and design stage of whatever intervention we wish to have, we will have the best of young people. My personal experience has to do with working with a group of young people to assess Ghana's performance on the Children's Act. There were a number of things I never thought about were there. But these young people went to the field. They designed their own instrument anyway, went to the field, collected the data, came back, analyzed it, and were telling me some of the things. I was like, I didn't know this was an issue. Oh, it is. This was the number of people who spoke about it. So we felt it was necessary for us to work on it. And for me, that was fantastic. And we always, we don't credit them for what they do. We should be able to do that for young people. And having worked in the digital space for a while, I felt that we're doing these young people a lot of disservice if we don't allow them use their creativity in analyzing information that they receive. So I don't buy into the idea of handing over checking information, whether it's true or not, to a social media company who will say, okay, this one looks like fake news, therefore let's ban or let's shadow ban it or whatever, or they should get onto this app and put the information there in order to assess whether it's true or not. If we allow these young people to have the empowerment they need, the capacity they need, they'll be able to analyze information in such a way that you will see how creative they could be, and they can tell you, no, this information doesn't look real. I didn't work with a group of young people. One day, a journalist approached me and said he was doing a survey on ABC, and he would like to talk to children. I said, okay, fair enough. When we entered the class where the young people were, when he started asking them the question, they said, no. One of them raised their hand. I have an objection. Okay. What was that? Okay. Auntie Awo, before you continue, would like to know, why is he asking us these questions? How much is he being paid to collect this information? And who will be reading what we say? At that point, the journalist felt, okay, I think I'll hold it here. I'll come back to you later. And that was the end of that conversation. And for me, if we can encourage young people to be themselves without coaching them or feeding them with what they should say, they will come up with ideas that will surprise all of us. And they will be themselves, and we will help situations better than what we want to subject them to. So as much as possible, it's important we take their rights into consideration and applying those rights to the latter. every bit of it, and especially when it comes to the digital space now. As much as possible, country-level programs should take into consideration young people as stakeholders, not as an afterthought, not as people who should be consulted after the program has been designed, but should be made to be at the table with a discussion. And if it's going to take you 5 months to get them to understand in order for them to give you their feedback, we need to do that. We can't be wishing them away or always saying there's no time, there's no money and stuff like that. No. And we cannot also leave our children with disability. If it means reducing the content to the Braille stage, or for those of them with hearing impairment, and then for those with speech issues, if they can express themselves through drawing, we need to put the discussion before them, let them express themselves in drawing for us to capture it as part of the discussion. It's only then we'll be building a fantastic future for these young people.
Good. Thank you, Awa. Voy a resumir, I'll be summarizing your thoughts and también los de João. Me parecen...
Some key points that I would like to point out in all this big delivery of knowledge and information that these four speakers have given us, and like it that there are many coincidences on what the maybe younger people and not that young people can think about child and teenagers. And the idea is that all these children and teenagers have to be the stakeholders of what is done to their generation. So leaving this habit of making public policies and making projects between experts at a closed office and a table in a very reduced space, or in an editorial line on a specific media platform that designs communication and what is said, thinking also in political ideals, in economical goals, and a series of other criteria. So I consider it to be very important to have this idea of empowerment to both children and adolescents, give them the tools so themselves can unleash their creativity, use different languages in the way their own capacities. Let's not forget people who live under conditions of disability or other conditions. Communication and media allow lots of formats of expression, not spoken language. It can be written, it can be drawings, music, and art, and generate spaces that promote that children and adolescents can exploit their creativity. It is essential. At the same time, as we create these safe spaces and we give them the tools to these children and teenagers so they can make their own decisions and discern what's right or wrong, develop critical thinking. So when I read news, I question this news. Is this AI? Is this real? I think many of us are in this constant thing. Oh, this picture looks so good, but would this be AI? What about this art piece? I think I've seen myself in all this week, and I see this image looks great. Is this AI? Having this critical capacity and give this capacity to children so they can empower. And children are here to question things. In a way, they come with new thinking. They have been here in this planet a little shorter than us, and they see things differently. So open spaces and a safe space for them to develop that way is something that has happened here during the conversation as essential. These are our main questions. So now I would like to ask the audience if there's any question. And meanwhile, and if you get any question, I think we have a few more minutes. So also ask Taissa and Francisco if you have any question for João and Awa that you would like to ask. Do you have any comments?
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, I have some comments, actually many comments. The truth is, from that structure that João mentioned about the mitigation of the impacts, the prevention, I think also the social media, in the end, is like another media for expression. It's got its particularities, but basically I think that hate that is transmitted to the children is not particular of the social media, but precisely it is part of a wider context, in a global context where they are perpetrating some breaches to the rights of the children, and the lives of children are being violated and breached to levels of life which are devastating. For example, what's happening in Gaza, or what's happening in more than 54 armed conflicts in all over the world, internal conflicts and conflicts against different countries, which have not been able to be solved through dialogue. And I think that hatred is also something that we need to rethink and to pose as a cultural thing that we need to do in terms of listening children a little more, and to make our society a less adult-centric society, and always the adults are the ones who make the decisions. It's important to do that from the reading, writing, drawing, and as Awo mentioned, and to give them those type of tools to children. I also wanted to mention the reading, which is essential of that formation process that is behind. In our foundation, for example, we have a statement of the Eco Hope, and we gather the children in different assemblies, different meetings. They need to go through a process of formation, of teaching them basic concepts about the different discussions that we're going to hold. Some days ago, I belonged to a consultant committee for a project that is called The Futures Now. It was a project of deliberation to bring proposals of the authorities in Spain to the legislator, to the decision makers. We had two organizations, one consultant committee with experts, and I was part of that, and also an assembly. The assembly didn't come from the thin air. Those were 40 people that were randomly selected and formed during 6 months. It's important to highlight that, and I will mention this. We need to take the time, because we cannot leave nobody behind, and we need to understand the different particularities of each person, the diversity, the plurality of our society. So it's basically that. Very good. Taissa, do you have any comment, a final comment or question? I'm okay. Thank you very much. And or João, any final comment? I think this example about the protagonism, it's important to say that we're to exercise that in a process that we're doing in Brazil about the creation of a guide for healthy use of screens for youngsters. And that's a process that is involving 6 ministries of the government in Brazil. Now, they created a group of 20 experts. That's like the traditional process up to there, but Alana is going to fulfill a very important role of listening and dialogues of the different topics with the young people. And I think that's not only an exercise for the public policies, it's also an exercise for the managers, because it's for us, it's very easy to take off from the reality that is more complex, and to be close in our offices and make decisions speaking with 1 or 2 people who agree with us. So to take this assessment that is more direct and with more capacity today, I think with more capacity of vision, and it's also going to be an exercise for us as managers. I hope this is a transforming exercise, because it's the first time that we're doing this. So I don't want to say that we do this. We're going to try to do this with the expertise of Alana, and I think that will offer us an opportunity that is going to be very important. Yeah, very good opportunity, and also for young people in Brazil to be attentive to that and to really ask for participation. Any final words?
Lastly, or finally.
Finally, yes.
Yes, what I would like to say is that as stakeholders in child development or in community development, these young people are projects. So it's important we help them, provide them with what they need. That is information, knowledge, skills, and what have you. When we are able to provide them with all of that, they will now become good participants, because in the digital media or participation in media generally is now two ways. They are creating content, they are participating in discussions and all of that. All those things require information, skills, and even money for data. So as much as possible, whilst we work to protect them, it looks like we've overhyped protection and we are leaving behind the information that they need, the knowledge they need, in order to be able to engage fruitfully and meaningfully in the space. So let's give children what they need, children and young people what they need in order for them to participate effectively. And that can only be done when we are intentional about our approach in dealing with them.
Thank you. Pueden suceder cosas maravillosas.
Great things can happen when we provide the tools to people who need them, and we leave them to explore in their creativity and their skills, not only in this space, but in any space in life. And they are so needed to face a multi-phase crisis as climate change. I want to ask the audience once again if there is any question. Yes, please, go ahead. I think we have a microphone. I'm Sergio from Uruguay. And consider what you're saying. In my days, we didn't speak about this. Now you're making this piece. We heard about the eco-anxiety term, which is something new for us. How can we work the situations that are generated for children and young people in this sphere? Once again, how can we manage the eco-anxiety that the climate change is causing in children and young people? Taissa, would you like to say something about eco-anxiety, how you face and address this? As a young girl, we face that difficulty. What I do is I teach them and I tell them to try to connect with the forest, with nature. Because if we are able to deal with all of these climate changes, we are also able to deal with the anxiety that is inside us, this approach and this closeness to forest and nature. When this happens to me, I go to the forest, to the nature, I connect myself with them, and then I can rethink and to reconnect with the nature. Thanks very much, Taissa. Very important to speak about nature is not just enough. We need to connect with it and to be there. Thanks, Taissa. Francisco? Well, I think that on one hand, I want to reaffirm this is a situation that is more and more common. In fact, in our movement, we are living and experiencing that many children in general are experiencing serious depression cases. The mental health and the state that many children and young people have when they find and read about this news. And this is the worst situation that we can face, really, basically, the loss of hope, because we always say that the generations, the young generations, are the future. So what kind of future are you going to have after the situation that we're living? But that future that I want to say is, we are not just the future, we are also the present, is losing that mood, and the hope in the hope is last thing that you lose. There's a saying, if you lose the hope, there isn't anything else to lose. And unfortunately, there are many young people, and in general also adult people, that in a situation like this in the world, they are losing hope and they don't have anything else. So that's where we have the challenge for our generation, is to give back the concept that is I wrote in my book, that is called eco-hope. The eco-hope, well, we talk about eco-anxiety, eco-hope, but it goes beyond, because eco, as Taissa said, it's got a relationship that is important with the nature. Eco comes from house. This is our house, our common house, a place without barrier, without frontiers, without borders. It's the only option we have. So in that framework, we need to learn from that common house, from nature. We learn from nature and we use it. In architecture, in urbanism, in many different areas of knowledge, we get inspired by nature. But I think also our action needs to be inspired by nature, in the sense that they get attached to life, and nature always get attached, and the struggle is maintained without giving up. Is resilient. The nature is resilient, and that's a very important word. Resilience, the climate resilience that we need in this moment of crisis, of climate crisis. So it's important to bring that eco-hope, but based on action, because the actions are the most important thing here. And I always provide this example. It's like exponential growth. If it's exponential, do you have a sheet here? Okay, please, just one piece of paper. But can I take it out? Yes. Thank you very much. No, this is okay. It's good. It's only the sheet. Look at the sheet. Very nice writings. Note. Just a simple sheet. We're going to turn it into... Now the sheet. A simple sheet has got double of width. Okay? Because this is a true. You cannot contradict myself. It's not fake information. Now we're going to turn it again. Now it's got 4 times its width, and when I go once again, it's now 8 times its width and 16 times its width. That's exponential width. If we do it more than 100 times, we can get to the moon. The idea is that here in this audience, we can tell to 3 other people about the eco-hope, and those 3 other people are going to tell other 3 people. And so this is like when you're illness, when there is a spread very quickly. That's how problems will grow, and also solutions will have to grow in this way. Thank you very much. Thanks, Francisco. I really love this very practical and visual example. Just to add, and please let me know how much time do we have, because I'm just taking advantage of this. Okay, we need to close. So I want to just provide final words, and taking the importance and showing action that we are trying, what we are trying to solve from the LCOY. We normally discuss this, and just something that is related to the environmental issue, is related to our lifestyle, the way we have disconnected from nature. So this is a way to show that we are overcoming this crisis, that we have the intention and that we are actioning to do this, is to reconnect with each other, because we are also part of nature and with nature itself. And I think it's an important challenge of the media, just to remove this clickbait speech, because it's very easy to generate clicks and to sell advertising when they provide a very terrifying headline. And so the invitation is also to struggle from the headlines, the eco-anxiety, and to turn it into eco-hope. Thanks very much to everyone for your participation. Thanks very much for being here and being part of this panel. And we hope that it has been a contribution to your eco-hope and your feelings, and that we can all move forward from this crisis. Thank you. Thanks very much.